Okay, it's 2024, and I can't believe I have to say this, but W.D. Gaster did not write the entries we see in the True Lab. I know that's a blunt statement, but with a recent theory making the rounds, the discussion's reignited, and I feel the need to make a more focused video explaining why neither Sans nor Gaster wrote half the entries, because I am tired of people doing Alphys dirty and misinterpreting the context. So, let's hit the ground running with one of the most obvious points I've seen. Time and time again, people use the inconsistent capitalization to imply that a different character wrote some of the entries, because of the precedent set by Sans and Papyrus. But right away, this is false. Want proof? Look at Alphys' letter before entering the lab. As you can see, Alphys wrote this letter with proper grammar. As for her text messages, it's true that some of these have lowercase letters and the inclusion of smileys as well. Keep that in mind for later, but also keep in mind that Alphys is not consistent in how she texts. Sometimes she capitalizes words for emphasis like a Homestuck character, like in her Mew Mew Kissy Cutie 2 review, but also keep in mind that there is a stark difference between online status updates and professional academic writing. The game itself confirms the early entries are Alphys. Look no further than entry number 1 here. This is it. Time to do what the king has asked me to do. I will create the power to free us all. I will unleash the power of the soul. Now look at Alphys' speech at the end of True Lab. As you probably know, Asgore asked me to study the nature of souls. So far, this aligns with the first proper grammar report. Later on in the reports, we have this. I've done it. Using the blueprints, I've extracted it from the human souls. I believe this is what gives our souls the strength to persist after death, the will to keep living, the resolve to change fate. Let's call this power determination. Now compare this to her speech. During my research, I isolated a power I called determination. I injected it into dying monsters so their souls would last after death. Now, you could say that Alphys is lying to claim credit for someone else's work, but why? The True Lab is clearly framed as Alphys' story. Her leitmotif is in Here We Are. The lead up to it is her date and her admitting to her faults and wanting to actually do something about it. At the end of Neutral, Flowey even nudges you to get to know her better. Everything points to Alphys. Plus, her letter makes it clear that she wants to come clean about her mistakes, once and for all. Also, if you want further proof that Alphys is the one who discovered determination, look no further than Toby's own comments in the Legends of Localization book, page 89. He said, determination turns out to be Alphys' code word for an actual physical substance that she injects into monsters, one that humans produce naturally in large quantities. The substance has the following properties. Creatures with too much are unable to die, determination. The being with the most determination in the underground has the power to change fate and use the in-game save load system. That's rather cut and dry, isn't it? Straight from the dog's mouth. So ask yourselves, why would Toby say this, only to make essential True Lab lore about a character who most players, without knowing of the fun events or the fandom's fixation on him, will never hear about? Fun events are largely RNG dependent. The odds of getting any of the Gaster follower events is slim, and even if you get the corresponding fun value, the odds of them appearing is not guaranteed. I understand that the mystery of Gaster is enticing, but from a storytelling perspective, it just makes no sense and turns what's an elegant, focused arc about Alphys being thrust into a position of responsibility in an unprecedented field of study into a complicated mess that only people who are deep in the fandom will be fully able to comprehend. Gaster is obviously more important to Deltarune, and while it's valid to be invested in the mystery and contemplate what he did as royal scientist, I'd argue that attributing Alphys' work to him is lazy. The footage you see now is a paste bin of all the True Lab entries in chronological order, which I used as a reference for ordering them in my Alphys video. As you can see, entries 1 through 8 are all in proper grammar. Entries 9 through 13 are all lowercase, but in entry 14, when the monsters wake up, the grammar returns to normal. This continues into entry 15, where Alphys talks about it being a happy ending and how she plans to send the monsters home. The souls in the vessel, Flowey, are all returned to Asgore, and everything seems great. Entry 15 even features a smiley face. Who else do we know who uses smileys? Alphys. Until everything goes to shit, and in entry 16, she loses the polished grammar again. Her unused entry 17 also aligns with her speech at the end of True Lab. Note, this is different from Gaster's entry number 17. Monsters' physical forms can't handle determination like humans can. With too much determination, our bodies begin to break down. Everyone's melted together. And in her speech, you see, unlike humans, monsters' bodies don't have enough physical matter to take those concentrations of determination. Their bodies started to melt and lost what physicality they had. Pretty soon all of the test subjects had melted together into those. Seeing them like this, I knew I couldn't tell their families about it. Entry number 19 also adds to this account. The families keep calling me to ask when everyone's coming home. What am I supposed to say? I don't even answer the phone anymore. But also, if you look at every single lowercase entry, they are written when Alphys is either distressed or depressed. In entries 9 through 12, she laments how nothing is working. The vessel, Flowey, has yet to awaken, and none of the other flowers she'd experimented on have shown any reactions to the determination. She also comments on sticky seeds. Now remember, golden flowers are from the surface. The only other places we see them in the underground are in Asgore's throne room, where Asriel died, the dump, where Alphys goes all the time, and the start of the ruins, where Kara was buried. Entry number 11 covers her lamenting Metaton's fame and how she feels abandoned by him, while also stressing over how his EX body makes her sweaty. This is obviously Alphys and not Sans, which for some reason people also attribute the lowercase entries to. But we know Alphys made Metaton's body, and the sweaty reaction is very in character for her. She was the one who proposed the design to him, and she was the one with a close friendship with Metaton, on top of her own insecurities making it clear that she doesn't want to be left behind. So if you need decisive proof that the entries weren't Sans, there you have it. Moving on, in entry number 12, she says she'll keep injecting monsters with determination, which leads into entry 13, where one of the monsters wakes up, and afterwards the grammar resumes until the amalgamation happens. The inconsistent grammar is not meant to convey two different characters. It's environmental storytelling. It communicates how the experiment started off promising, and Alphys was full of confidence and hope until it all seemed to stall, only for her to regain that hopeful spark before it all fell apart. Plus, her end-of-lab speech makes the same sort of formal, academic explanation that the earlier reports use, further tying them to her character. It's easy to lose track of this when the entries are all out of order, but I'll link the pastebin in the description, as well as the section of my larger Alphys analysis that goes through every report in order to present the order of events most consistently. As one final point on grammar inconsistencies, I'd be remiss not to mention Sans. There are many times where he slips into proper grammar in the default Undertale font when speaking, usually when he is being serious or threatening. The last corridor is a good example of this, starting with no dialogue portrait and normal text. This further shows that Toby does use shifts in grammar to communicate tone, further cementing Toby's intent with the lowercase entries. Still, there are a few other points I've seen thrown around that I want to address. Editing dork here with a quick addendum. A few days ago, the Undertale Valentine's newsletter dropped, including 44 different cards written by various characters. Alphys had 3, including one anonymous card, and all were written in proper grammar. So, for those who are still wanting to argue, there's recent proof. Additionally, her Mew Mew Kissy Cutie review in deltarune Chapter 1 also uses proper grammar. So, there you have it. Without a shadow of a doubt, there's no indication that Alphys can't write in proper grammar, or that this is inconsistent with Toby's writing style. One of the earlier reports says this: I've chosen a candidate. I haven't told Asgore yet, because I want to surprise him with it. In the center of his garden, there's something special. The first golden flower that grew before all the others. The flower from the outside world. It appeared just before the queen left. I wonder, what happens when something without a soul gains the will to live? People love to latch onto the comment about the queen because of Alphys' reaction to Toriel in the True Pacifist reunion scene. But Alphys not recognizing Toriel doesn't mean she isn't aware there was a queen. As in the imperfect pacifist ending, she's not surprised that Toriel exists, but that Toriel is attractive. While it's true that Alphys has access to the royal family tapes, those tapes do not have any visual, and thus all she had to go off of was Toriel's voice. Ordinary monsters mention a queen, as well as Asriel and Kara, in the new Homewalk. This is common knowledge. There's no way Alphys isn't aware that Asgore had a son, and thus a wife. Being surprised by how much Toriel resembles Asgore doesn't mean she's fully ignorant. And as for how Alphys was able to work with the first flower when Asriel died so long ago, lest we forget, the flower grew from the dust of a boss monster. Boss monsters are special monsters, stronger than the rest. We're normally immortal unless they have living parents or children. Asriel aged while he was alive, obviously, but it's very possible that his dust had some latent properties that influenced the flower's lifespan, or golden flowers are simply long-lived. Or Asgore takes such good care of them or uses some sort of magic to aid in their longevity the way that monster food does not spoil. As for how she'd know if it's the first flower, it's obvious that it holds a great sentimental value to Asgore, so it's very likely she knew that due to talking to him. Could be a fun fact he shared. It could be that this flower was larger than the others, or any other number of differences and distinctions. The fact of the matter is, the first flower is Flowey, not some unrelated flower that Gaster experimented on. The reason Flowey has memories of being Asriel is because the flower grew from his dust. The flower was also returned to the throne room, as mentioned in entry number 15. Seems like this research was a dead end, but at least we got a happy ending out of it. I sent the souls back to Asgore, returned the vessel to his garden, and I called all the families and told them everyone's alive. I'll send everyone back tomorrow. Flowey's own account in the No Mercy run also adds to this. And we know that Flowey went through many runs and did many things, but always reset them away. However, come entry number 18, the flower is gone. This likely occurs after Flowey has grown bored of resetting and is off in the ruins or somewhere else, maybe hanging with Papyrus. Do you not see how elegant everything is if you set aside injecting Gaster into the determination experiments? Everything connects seamlessly, and it works well into the narrative of True Lab being Alphys' history and experiments. Not only does injecting Gaster into it overcomplicate this narrative, but it also feels lazy when Gaster's own entry number 17, with its talk of negative photon readings and darker than dark, feel much more tied to what we know of deltarune, leaving room for a host of fun interpretations. It also makes Alphys' reaction to Papyrus mentioning Flowey make a whole lot more sense. Another point of contention I've seen is entry number 2, which states, "The barrier is locked by soul power. Unfortunately, this power cannot be recreated artificially. Soul power can only be derived from what was once living, so to create more, we will have to use what we have now, the souls of monsters." Some have taken this to mean that this was before any humans fell, but there's one crucial problem with this. The experiment still required DT, which was derived from human souls. A much simpler explanation for this is that Alphys was referring to the fact that they did not have the 7 souls required to break the barrier. Ergo, in order to supplement a 7th soul, she needed to find a way to create more soul power. If you look at entry number 3, extracting a soul from a living monster would require incredible power. Besides being impractical, doing so would instantly destroy the soul's host. And unlike the persistent souls of humans, the souls of most monsters disappear immediately upon death. If only I could make a monster's soul last. Not only does this serve as foreshadowing for later, with how Flowey absorbed all of MonsterKind's souls while still living thanks to the power of 6 human souls, but the further mention of human souls consistency leads into later reports, where she discusses the discovery and extraction of determination. Because again, as she states later, as you probably know, Asgore asked me to study the nature of souls. Asgore has every reason to want an alternative. Asgore does not want to take another human life. By his own admission, he never wanted to and simply acted out of rage. By the time the DT experiments take place, it's very likely that they already had 6 souls, and thus Asgore has an immense burden on his shoulders. By entrusting Alphys with the DT experiments, it was likely his goal to find a more humane substitute. There's even foreshadowing of this in Mettaton's cooking show. While it's easy to brush this off as a joke, Toby has a way of taking jokes and gags and turning them into plot points later. Mettaton's diaries document his bond with Alphys before she became Royal Scientist, with their meeting at the Human Fan Club and Alphys sharing the designs for the ideal body she wants to make Mettaton. They also mention at the very beginning that Shyren's sister fell down. Some have raised concerns with how the timelines line up. If Shyren's sister had fallen down before Alphys began the determination experiments, how was Alphys able to experiment on her? There's a really simple explanation. Fallen down monsters remain comatose for a fair bit of time. The game never actually states how swiftly they turn to dust after entering this state. We know from Bratty and Catty that Alphys got her job soon after showing Asgore Mettaton. I think the most likely outcome is that this all happened very fast. It would also add to the tragedy, as Alphys barely had time to grapple with her new role before she was tasked with such an urgent experiment. Another really important thing to point out is how none of the properly capitalized entries remotely sound like Gaster. There's a consistent pattern to the way Gaster speaks and writes. He uses all capitalization with short, fragmented sentences. You see this clearly in the Goner Maker segment of Deltarune, as well as anytime Gaster takes over the Undertale Twitter account prior to the chapter releases. Contrast this to the manner of speech in both sets of True Lab entries, and it really doesn't hold up under scrutiny, especially when you consider his own entry number 17, which says,
"Entry number 17. Dark. Darker yet darker. The darkness keeps growing. The shadows cutting deeper. Photon reading is negative. This next experiment seems very interesting. What do you two think?"
This lines up with the short passages of text, broken up by line breaks, with a general lack of punctuation overall. Gaster using Twitter would imply Gaster is typing, so if the entries are typed, then why would he have such different mannerisms? From a characterization standpoint, this also falls apart under scrutiny, as character voice is one of the things Toby is most adept at, and any deviation, such as Sans speaking more seriously, is done with a purpose. Even with Alphys' entries, the properly capitalized passages still feel like her. With that said, there's one other oddity I want to talk about. The idea that Gaster successfully did what Alphys couldn't before Alphys even tried just doesn't hold up to me. The concept that Dogami, Doggeressa, and Gerson were injected with DT by Gaster has no real bearing in the canon text and feels like a complication at best to me, as interesting as it might be in a fan work. Gerson is old, yes, and has been around since the war, but we A, don't know the lifespan of every monster species that is an unbossed monster, B, he's a turtle. Turtles have a very, very long lifespan in reality, so Toby's choice to make Gerson one is most likely meant to be a play on that aspect of turtles and nothing more. I've seen a theory that he's a boss monster and this is why he's dead in Deltarune due to his children, but we have no indication that Alvin or any of his other kids don't exist in Undertale just because we don't see them, so that's up in the air. As for Dogami and Doggeressa, you can absolutely read them as elderly due to their poor eyesight and the fact that they were around for the Nose Nuzzling Championship of '98. I personally discussed this in my video on Undertale's timeline, but there's no need for injected DT for this to be a thing. Again, we don't know the average monster's lifespan compared to humans, just that normal monsters do age and eventually die. Plus, it raises way too many questions. Endogyny was made with the parents of all of the canine unit, dog marriage included. The parents would be older than them and have entered the fallen down state, which is a state monsters enter prior to death. Plus, if it had been done successfully, why only them? Why is this not even mentioned by the dog couple or Gerson? While there's certainly no harm in using such an idea for an AU or a fanfic, as I said, it ultimately just doesn't match up with what we know of Undertale's lore, and I personally find the implication that Gaster is just Alphys but better really frustrating when all we know about Gaster in the context of Undertale is that he made the core and fell into one of his own creations and shattered. He wasn't perfect, and yet so often people in this fandom try to paint him as such. And it's true that the Gaster followers discuss how Asgore took his sweet time replacing him, so there's no doubt he was skilled. He made the core and is clearly connected to whatever's going on in Deltarune, but you don't need to take away another, more central character's accomplishments and work to make Gaster interesting. In fact, I'd argue that doing so does quite the opposite. It opens plot holes, like why Alphys would be tasked with doing this again, especially when the goals of her experiment did require monsters to die so their souls could be preserved with DT. See here in entry number 3. Immortal Monsters were never the goal. If there was a precedent for this, DT would have been ruled out entirely. And while it's true that Alphys worked with blueprints to make the determination extractor, whether you attribute that to Gaster or not doesn't necessarily mean that Gaster would have used it in the same way or even called it the same thing. And whether or not they were Gaster's blueprints is still debatable. The DT extractor resembles Gift Trot more than Gaster blasters, so the looks aren't necessarily an indication. And there are blueprints in Sans' lab that are ambiguously described as strange symbols, which would point to Gaster, or bad handwriting, which would point to Alphys. Those blueprints may also be unrelated to the DT extractor and instead relate to the broken machine as well. It's just as possible that Alphys was following her own blueprints or referencing a different machine and repurposing it. Toby is no stranger to vague or weird phrasing when you consider Sham's description of Spade King's rise to power in Deltarune, and how they say, "The remaining king put him and his strange son into power." We know that in Chapter 2 that the knight is only referred to with they and it, so it's likely what this dialogue meant was the remaining king put himself and his strange son into power. Basically, I bring this up to say that the blueprints are inconclusive evidence that the machine wasn't Alphys' own work. Fun to speculate on, perhaps, and given the nature of Dark Worlds and Deltarune, it is possible that Gaster could have come to similar ideas and conclusions independently, but regardless, where Undertale's main story is concerned, work with determination was Alphys' doing, and we have nothing that ties Gaster directly to that set of specific experiments. It's easy to get swept up in the Gaster mystery and want to inject him into what we do know about the true lab, as it was the previous royal scientist. I'm not saying people are wrong to theorize and speculate, but I genuinely believe that people attribute way too much importance to Gaster in the core story events of Undertale. As I stated earlier, he is a character you can go the entire game without knowing about, so why would Toby sneakily make him the true driving force behind a sequence of events that are central to Alphys' development arc? It generally feels like this mindset is due to people already disliking Alphys, but finding Gaster alluring because of how mysterious he is and wanting to make him a bigger deal in the context of Undertale. Again, speculative fanworks are cool, but I genuinely believe it's a discredit not only to Alphys, but to Gaster to act as though the two did the exact same thing, when there is so much more you can do with the character and many more mysteries to consider. What's up with the Goner Maker in Deltarune? What's up with the creepy green menu you get when you start a fresh save? What's with all the meta-knowledge he gives the secret bosses? And is Deltarune Gaster the same as Undertale Gaster? These are all worthwhile avenues to pursue that don't strip away the agency and importance of Alphys and Undertale's plot. But let me know what you think in the comments. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Also, if you missed it, I put out a video on Gerson recently that sadly only made 20k views. If you want to learn more about Undertale's coolest shopkeeper, please do consider checking it out. And if you want to support me financially and help me continue to produce videos like this and other creative works full-time, please consider heading to my Patreon page. There are a lot of cool perks, from early access scripts, patron polls, work-in-progress story drafts, concept art, and more. My next video will be a patron-voted topic on the way the Undertale fandom overlooks the core themes and meta-narrative of Undertale's No Mercy run, and revisiting what it set out to do. Stay tuned for that in the future. I'm also streaming Persona 3 Reload on my Twitch channel and hope to upload the VODs soon. The videos themselves will probably be unlisted, but the playlist will be public. I also hope to upload a fixed version of the Undertale Yellow playthrough soon, and get back to that in the near future. Thanks so much for watching, and have a great day.